What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. We are on truck bed camper build part 3, and in this part of the build series we're going to start working on the hinges that are going to help raise our roof and keep it sturdy while it's up, as well as the rails that our fabric is going to attach to, and possibly a few other things. We'll see how far this video drags out. If you haven't seen our other parts of this build series, I recommend you go back and watch those first. It's basically just me building this entire structure you see here. In the first video, we get the main structure done. In the second video, we do our lid and get our skin on our front wall, as well as the underside of our overhang. Got the iPad out to give you a better look at what we're going to be building. So these are the hinge systems that are going to help support and keep the roof sturdy while it's up. Of course, we will have gas struts, what we will get into later. Basically, it's going to consist of two U-shapes. This bottom one may actually be a box, and then a U-shape up here. There will be a pivot point here and here, and as well as pivots here, 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 and here. So to raise and lower the roof will depend on if you push or pull this bar here. If it doesn't make sense now, it'll make some more sense once we get into this. The way I have it planned out, our overall standing height inside of the truck should be about 6'9". And I did 6'9" because even when we're sitting up on the bed here, we should still not be able to hit our head while we're sitting up on the mattress, and just kind of have some more room to move around in the bed area without feeling so cramped. Of course, there'll be plenty of standing room while you're standing in the bed of the truck, and it should give the camper a really nice big feel. As far as measurements go, I will have some blueprints for sale to give you all the exact measurements of this entire build, but our side bars here are 26 inches long. Our top bar is 36 inches long. These are both 1x1, 1/8 of an inch wall aluminum tubing, and then our bottom bar is 34 inches long, which is 3/4 by 3/4, 1/8 of an inch wall aluminum tubing as well. First part of our hinge mechanisms coming on. I didn't do a time lapse to this part just because it took a lot of figuring, and it would have been a really long time lapse as I was sitting here measuring everything up and getting it all straight. As you can see in the first one, I did get the main part welded up, and I did go through and cap all of the ends so there was no open tubes. What I used to secure it to the frame is actually some hinges from tnuts.com. If you guys have watched any of my drawer system builds, it's the same website. I have a link in the description. They're just aluminum hinges, and they're rated for, I believe, 40 pounds a piece, so it should be plenty weight. Plus, we're going to have gas struts assisting this, so they should be plenty strong. Right now, it's still kind of hard for me to explain exactly how this is going to work. It'll be a lot more clear once I get the second half of this hinge system made. I'll get this first part popped up and try to explain a little bit better. As I was getting this all situated, some things that really helped me out is I measured and marked a center line on our camper structure, and then also a center line on our hinge mechanism. So when I was placing my hinges, I knew that they were dead center, or at least really close. As well as these little Velcro ties, they're actually like gear ties for camping. Now I was looking for a way to hold this in, and I was like, oh, you know what? I'll just wrap those there, and that'll hold this in. And then I used a clamp to hold this hinge in place while I did a center punch, drilled, and put my first rivet in. After I got one rivet in, everything was nice and sturdy, and it was easy to do the rest of them. So here's the first bottom half of our hinge in the upright position. The overall height will be higher than this. This is just to kind of give you guys an idea of what's going on. So then there will be another U-shaped kind of aluminum structure like I just made. That's going to be just on the outside of this with a bolt that goes through, and then that'll be able to pivot. And even now, I can't think of a good way to explain it, but basically when I'm in the camper and the lid's shut, I will be pushing on this bar, and as I push on this bar, this one is going to pivot down, and basically it'll be, imagine like Pac-Man jaws, and then it'll go up into a straight position and lock into place with a pin. This is going to be what our fabric attaches to. It'll run the full circumference of this upper structure. Whenever I get all the pieces cut, it'll butt flat against this hinge, and it also act as a stop so this can't overextend. Sorry if this doesn't make sense right now, but I promise it'll make a whole lot more sense, and I'll do a better video showing it opening and closing and all that once I get the rest of it made. I originally was going to do riv nuts to make these hinges removable, and I went with rivets mainly because the size of these hinges put the holes very close to the edge here, and there wasn't going to be enough room for a riv nut. These rivets are going to be plenty strong. As I mentioned in some other videos, they have an extremely high shear rate. If anything, what would fail with these hinges might actually bend a little bit, but I think they're going to be good. They're rated for 40 pounds a piece, and our gas struts are going to assist. We got our other side fixed there as well, and now I think it's going to be, I might have to remove the roof, and I'll figure out what my overall height is going to be. I think it's going to be somewhere around 33 inches. It'll give me overall standing height of about 6'9". I don't want to go much over 33 inches just because I think when it comes to fabric, things are normally a yard wide. So I want to keep it kind of in that realm. That way when I get my fabric, it'll just be one piece and it'll be just the right shape. Making the U portion of our hinge system, our sides are going to be 1x1 and 18 inches long, and then our top 3/4 tubing is going to be 36 and 3/16. I did the 3/16 to account for the bushings and washers that are going to be between both of the hinge mechanisms. So I've run into a packaging issue. When I first looked at it, I thought everything was going to fit great, but that was until I actually used this 2x1 piece of aluminum here. So what that's done is actually offset this hinge down an extra 1/4 inch, which took away all my room. If I didn't do 3/4 inch here, it would fit even worse. But as you can see, the holes in my hinge are lining up with pretty much right on the edge of this stock. There's really no way to get a rivet in there. And then I'm also worried about when I close that side, I'm gonna have the mattress over there. So these bars are really gonna have to lay up tight, pretty as close as they can to the ceiling just to kind of fit. Unfortunately, what I'm gonna have to do is drill these rivets out, take these hinges off here, and then I'm gonna take an angle grinder and actually remove these blocks that I welded in. Of course, this is a pretty big setback as far as did all the work to get the hinges on there, get these blocks in there, and now it's not gonna fit like I thought it would. But I'm not gonna let it get me down. So what we're gonna do is just gonna get this off, we're gonna get it done, and we're gonna make it work. Alrighty guys, we are now at version 2 of the landing pads for our hinges. Instead of having those blocks like I did on the corner, all I did was take some 3/4 bar and just run them across here on both sides. So that allowed me to have plenty of space for me to mount my hinges, and also it recessed these hinges up another 1/4 inch closer to the ceiling, which gave me the clearance that I needed for everything to package in here correctly. Another thing to think about, when I have my seal in between here, it is probably going to bump this up a 1/4 inch. So maybe with the other setup, it might have just worked, but I didn't want it to bottom out on this before the seal actually fully compressed. So with this setup, we got clearance all the way down tight. So with our seal here, we should still have plenty of clearance. And let me see if I can get a shot here showing you just how tight clearances are. So this is our upper bar and this is our lower one. And you can see they are butted up nice and tight here. And at the same time, we have good contact with our hinge. You can see we're right on that leading edge, and our holes will be nice and centered in our bar when we add our rivets. I'm using some clamps to hold everything in place just so I can get mocked up. So I know my overall lifting height, I want to be 33 inches. That'll land me at about 6'7" or so of standing height inside the camper. So with 33 overall height, I know my hinges, when they're folded up, ends up being about a 1/4 inch. So that means with my bars fully extended, I need about 32.5 inches out of these bars. You divide 32.5 by 2, you get 16.25. So that told me my top bar, I needed the hole to be exactly 16.25 inches from the end. So as this pivots up, it's having an equal amount to stand up, and when it pivots down, it's still gonna meet exactly where it needs to be. If the measurement was off by, for example, I think I would have some binding and it just wouldn't end up working out really well. And now that everything's all clamped in place, I do not have these hinges riveted just yet because I'll have to remove everything to do that. I did do some marks so I know where my hinges are gonna land. I took a Sharpie and marked my hole directly across to here. So in theory, the holes on our lower bar would also be 16.25 inches from this edge. But I wanted to go ahead and do a reference line, so when I measure this out, even if it's just a tad under 16.25 or just a tad over, I know it's gonna fit just right because this is exactly how I have it mocked up. If this is confusing at all, I hope it makes a lot more sense once I get this roof lifted up and I can kind of explain the hinges and really give you a good look at what I did here. I know it's a little confusing to look at with all this grid in here. That being said, I'm really glad I did not rivet the roof on here yet. This part right here would be just about impossible to do. So when you're going to build your own, do not put the skin on the roof quite yet because there's going to be a lot of figuring out and measuring and math. Now we've got our mechanism hanging down, and what we're doing here is lining up some of these marks that we made. Basically, this is exactly how it's going to sit when it's flipped all the way up. Since mine are already riveted and I don't want to have to drill those rivets out and then rivet them back on, I've clamped it here. I'm going to use the holes on our upper part of the hinge as a guide. So now this is clamped, I can hold this steady, and I got a drill bit that's going to go clean through this, and this is going to keep it straight as I'm drilling through our bar here, and we'll do that on both sides. Going into this project, I already knew this part was going to be quite a challenge as I've never built anything like this before. and I just had some pictures to base off of offline. Most companies end up using some sort of larger plastic panels with piano hinges. I didn't want to do that. Not that that doesn't work great, but it would just be hard for me to cut those exactly and make them look nice. This I feel like is going to be very sturdy. It's going to be aesthetically pleasing. It'll be long lasting. I won't have to worry about things wearing out on me in the future. Alrighty guys, here we got everything fully extended. I'm just using a clamp to hold this in place temporarily. We can't pop the front just yet, just because if I were to try to open that front, I don't have anything stopped. I don't have gas struts holding everything or even fabric to hold everything sturdy. So it would start leaning this way. So won't be able to pop that one until later. But I wanted to show you guys how this actually works. So I'll remove this clamp. If it hasn't been clear on how this works yet with me explaining it, now it should make a whole lot of sense. So as the camper is going down, you can see our mechanism starts to fold in. And then this is in the total closed position. And then of course, when I want to open it up, I'll be inside the camper. I start pushing up on the ceiling. That's when our gas struts are going to come into effect. So it'll start raising the ceiling. And this isn't, I mean, it only weighs 48 pounds and you're only lifting one side at a time. Once we get our skin and the fan in there, it'll weigh a little bit more. But with the gas struts, it shouldn't be heavy at all. So we start lifting this. You can see this straightens out. And then that's where our pop locks or whatever I use are going to lock into place. And then I'll be able to actually lift the front of the camper, and then we'll be fully deployed. I want to give you guys a better look at how the packaging worked out for this hinge mechanism. So as I talked about before, when I had to redesign my landing pads to get just another 1/4 inch of clearance for it to fit, here is a good example of why. You can see our upper hinge is actually butted up tight against this. So previously, this hinge back here was sitting a 1/4 inch lower. So when it was all sandwiched together like this, it actually wouldn't fit at all. I mean, the lid wouldn't be able to shut, our gasket probably wouldn't seal on the outside, and it just wasn't gonna work. Me redoing this and doing my landing pads with a matching 3/4 bar to match what was already with the ceiling, it was the ticket. Also doing a 3/4 bar here instead of the 1 inch like I did here. If I would have done just a 1 inch and 1 inch, I would have had to have remade this upper bit. I would have had to go back and make 2 new ones, and that was a total accident. I got lucky on that, and I'm really glad I did. So when you guys are designing your hinge mechanism, it's a good idea to really kind of think through this. It's going to be a tight fit when it comes to this stuff. Now, of course, to get more room, I could have had this part of the hinge offset down, and then this would have had all the space right here. But I wanted to have, when this is deployed, the hinge to be totally flush with the wall. I didn't want it protruding out and just kind of wanted maximum space. So it was worth the effort to make it fit. What you see here is the profile that we're going to be using to attach our fabric to. This is just a scrap piece just to show you guys what's going on, but it will be running the entire perimeter of our lower structure. Our fabric will be able to be bolted or riveted to it, or however I decide to attach it. We still have enough room for our lower hinge to fold back. I'll kind of lift the roof here and show you. So as it comes up, you can see there's still plenty of room for that. There's still plenty of room for a ceiling surface for it to butt up against. And as you can really start to see how I was talking about how tight of a fit this was. I did plan this to the best of my ability. I didn't expect it to be this tight. I honestly thought I was going to have a ton more room, but you guys get to learn from the stuff that I'm dealing with when you go to build your own. That would make your project go a whole lot smoother. Of course, if you guys are watching this video and you're planning on making a wedge camper instead of a pop-up, you're just using the video as a reference, you'll want this to move up a lot higher, and you won't need a mechanism like this. Just some gas struts will do. But I think once our front is popped as well, we're gonna have a total standing height of about 6'7". So it's gonna be so much room in there, and it's gonna make a little 5-foot bed Tacoma feel like a huge camper back there. As you can imagine, even if our wedge went up higher, it just kind of limits your space to be able to hang out. With our front pop, we should be able to still be able to sit up on the bed and still have the whole bed open back here in the truck. And I think it's just going to be really awesome and a nice, easy, livable space. So from here, I got to start figuring out gas struts. I know the current skeleton of the roof weighs right at about 48 pounds. We do have our exhaust fan that's going to go in there. That doesn't weigh too much, probably 10 pounds or so. And then the skin of our roof, which will be this aluminum sheet. It's 1/16 of an inch. The sheet isn't very heavy itself. So I think overall our roof will be probably just under 100 pounds. As far as strut placement goes, if you guys see like full wheel campers, they'll normally do gas strut from here to here for lifting. I think what I'm going to do is actually go on the sides. So it'll be the same kind of V shape, but it'll be on the side, and that'll kind of help with forward and back movement. because as you can imagine, our hinges here already have our side-to-side movement locked down. It's not gonna be able to move around at all. So having some forward and back there, I think will really help keep the stability of it while it's fully deployed. I actually did message a company, Topo Toppers. They make wedge style, and they also make a double pop like this. And they gave me a little bit of advice on the gas struts they use. They use 44-inch long ones, and then anywhere from 50 to 85 pounds of pressure. It really all depends on how heavy your roof is. So I'm gonna sit down, do some math, and figure that out. But I think I'll go ahead and stick with that 44-inch length on the struts. We got our 4 gas struts in mounting hardware that just came in the mail. I ordered them from Lift Support Depot. As you can see here, they have a total overall length of 44 inches, a 19-inch stroke, and a compressed length of about 24 1/4. These are 40-pound force struts. Based off the weight of my roof is going to be just under 100 pounds. So the 40 pounds should work out nicely. The way that I actually found on which struts I wanted to use is I found this other YouTube video from another channel called Wander with Kate, and she's got a really awesome YouTube video just outlining everything you could ever need to know about gas struts and picking for a pop-up camper. She has built a pop-up camper herself on her Tacoma. Let me see, let me scroll through here and find it. So she's familiar with the process, and she's done a DIY build similar to mine. So go check out her channel, and a lot of props to her for putting together that video, because it really helped me in deciding on which struts I was going to go with. So definitely use Wander with Kate's video as a resource, and also I highly recommend Lift Supports Depot. As far as pricing goes, the gas struts are a little pricey, I guess you could say. I think this is probably standard pricing across the market. $49 per gas strut, and then the hardware is $16 per 4. So you'll need 2 sets of hardware and 4 gas struts, and it comes out to just over $200. So making sure that you're going to get the correct ones the first time is very important. So now that we've got our gas struts, we got to work on placement. What I've done is measured out, this is the center of the camper, rated about 54 inches, and we made another mark at 40.5, and basically just broke it down into segments here so that I can get a visual of proportions of the camper and where I want to put the struts themselves. I decided to put the bottom half of our struts right on the 40.5 mark, and this is 40.5 from this end to that point, and then same for this side, so 40.5 to that point. I put them right in the center, and I know our total closed length on them is just under 25 inches. It's actually 24 1/4. So I took a piece of aluminum and made a mark right at 25 inches. I don't want the struts to be compressed and bottomed out all the way completely. So doing it at 25 inches works out really well. From there, all I did was line it up with my mark here, and then it landed me right over here and got me a measurement on where my strut's gonna mount as far as where it ends on the camper. 15 and 13/16 from each end is where the top of our strut is going to mount. So now with the end of our strut placement figured out, I've lifted up one side of the roof, and we're going to verify that the struts and the placement work as far as the length goes. So we have 44 inches total to work with. Our roof is only popping up 33 inches, so there should be plenty. So I'll just kind of hold it in this spot, and you can see here we got plenty of strut sticking up over the roof, which is a good thing. You don't want these to be fully extended when the roof's all the way up. You want them to be under load slightly, and that'll just kind of help it be more rigid. So this location for our ball mount and this location for our ball mount should be perfect. Once you've verified all your measurements, go ahead and translate them to the other side, and I'll show you how I'm going to mount these things. Here I took a piece of scrap aluminum just to make sure my riv nut was going to work out good. So these are 5/16 thread riv nut to match the 5/16 threads on our ball ends here. So these ball ends basically just go into our sockets, and that's what our strut's going to mount and pivot on and everything. What I'll do is add some riv nuts at our predetermined locations on the side of the structure, and then these will just be able to screw right into it. I had a few things to consider when doing the strut placement. I will be mounting an awning and a shower cube on the sides of the camper, so making sure that I still had sufficient room to fabricate up some mounts for the awning is very important. And also consider where you're going to have to put your latches. I'm planning on putting my latches on the front and back side of the camper. Shouldn't have to worry about having room on the sides for those. Getting the struts installed was a little bit of a challenge. As you saw, the struts in their extended length are longer than where the mounting points are. So I had to attach the bottom half and then actually manually collapse the strut. I know it says it's only a 40-pound strut, but it sure feels like it's a lot stiffer than that, at least in this situation. On hotter days, your strut will be harder to compress than on colder days. This day, it was pretty mild temps outside, so it's much easier than if it were to be nice and hot outside. Here's our roof in the raised position. See the gas struts hold it up nicely. I actually don't even need these clamps. I'll kind of show you right here. You can see these are still kind of flopping around, so they're not even supporting the weight of the roof at all. The struts are doing all the work. I still am going to do some sort of stops. I'm thinking I will actually weld some plates probably on this side so it can't overextend. It'll hit a stop there. And then like I mentioned, our flange for our fabric is also going to act as a stop to keep it from overextending this way. Once all the fabric is actually in, it'll be too tight to be able to lean one way or the other. But as you can see, even without fabric or any of those stops, I mean, this thing's solid. It's not going anywhere. Even the wind was blowing like crazy. I think having the opposing forces, so basically this is locking our horizontal movement, and then this is locking our forward and back movement with the struts opposing each other. So right now, without the skin on the roof and the fan, the struts definitely seem a little stiff. So hopefully the 40-pound ones aren't too strong. But that being said, by the time I do the aluminum skin and put the fan up there and possibly a headliner or whatever, it'll probably over double the weight of the roof right now. So that double weight plus the leverage of being able to pull on this thing should have it be able to close nice and easy. One thing I noticed while I was raising it is once this side raised, this side wanted to go ahead and raise up too. So I will have to do some sort of lock to keep that from trying to raise up as this side goes. Possibly, we'll just kind of have to see how that plays out once I get in there. For now, while I got this thing up, I can start working on a few other things. I think even before I skin my roof, I'll go ahead, I'll get my flange put on here that my fabric's gonna attach to. And then once that's on there, I can pull a strut off each side and probably go ahead and close this thing up, and then we can skin the roof. We've got all of our flanges cut up, and this is going to be what our fabric attaches to. So what I'm doing, like I mentioned in the other videos, is I'm butting this up against our hinge here. So then this will act as a stop so these can't overextend this way, but also give us plenty of sealing surface here. What I initially ordered was 3/4 of an inch by 1.5 inches. What was actually sent out to me was one stick of 3/4, 1.5 inches, and then one stick of 1 inch and 1.5 inches. It ended up working out all right, but as you can see, when these corners go to match up, I did have to cut this one right here. That way everything sits nice and flush because I had a little bit sticking out there. If you're going to do this yourself, honestly, I do recommend going ahead and getting the inch flange on the bottom. You can see the flange is kind of small here. So where our rivets are going to go, there's not much room and you have limited space to get your drill or even your rivet gun down in here. So maybe the 1 inch by 1.5 inches would be the way to go. I measured how far this edge of our hinge was from here, and it was about, I think, 2 1/16 or 2 1/8 or something like that. And I made some marks, found my corner mark here, and then also made a line here. So that allowed me to do some measurements and figure out exactly how long each of these pieces needed to be. So now that I have kind of a guide to help me place these in the correct place that runs all the way around the perimeter of this so everything's nice and even, I'll first start with my ends. I'll get these in place. I'll do a rivet on each end and then work my way, get our rear and our front riveted in. Once these are solid in place, we'll butt up our sides, make sure we don't have to do any sort of trimming to make it fit good, and then we'll get these riveted in as well. At this point of the build, I've drilled more holes than I can count and put in a ton of rivets. You can always opt to just weld these on. I chose to do rivets. I think in the end it'll just be much cleaner and just look a little more professional than just welding them on, as well as have them sandwiched down tight to the frame, which will also help with water intrusion along with our Sikaflex. All of our flanges are riveted on here. Everything fit pretty good. Once it was all riveted up, I did take that plastic hammer and just kind of make sure that these corners match good. You can see they do match up pretty well. I think the biggest gap I have is actually up here, which really isn't still too bad. You either have no gap here, large gap there, or have about an equal gap on each side. No big deal here because whenever we go to seal this thing up, we'll be running Sikaflex up this little bit and all along this backside, so it won't matter as far as water intrusion goes. I'm not drilling any holes in this part of the flange just yet. I'm so undecided how I'm going to attach the fabric, and that's just one of those things that I'm going to tackle and figure out once we reach that stage of the build. Next, we're going to pull a strut off each side so I can get this roof down, and then we're going to work on getting the roof skin on top of our roof. If you've seen the other parts of the camper build, you know I'm just using a skill saw with a high tooth count blade. It cuts aluminum very well and also very clean. Rigged up some sort of fence just so I can get a nice straight line and make sure everything lines up nicely. Once my piece was cut, I got my corner rivets started and then went around with a angle grinder and mouse and made sure all my edges were nice and flush so it looks all uniform and I don't have any overhangs or any stuff that's kind of inset. After everything's flushed up, we used our stencil that you may have seen in my other videos and went ahead and drilled our holes and got everything all secured. Here we've got our skin completely attached. I didn't do rivets every 3 inches just because I thought it was a little redundant. I did every 3 inches on the bottom because that was also going to be kind of supporting some load. This is just holding our roof down. And I think in the end, once it's powder coated, I'll go through and do a little bit of Sikaflex all through here just to avoid any sort of rattling that may occur between these gaps. And plus I wanted to have the least amount of holes in the roof as possible. I think these rivets will be plenty watertight. Drawing the grid out across this made it really easy to know exactly where to drill. If you guys remember, I had some reference marks from previous work I was doing and they were lined up directly with our crossbars and all that good stuff. So it was easy enough to take that straight edge in the time lapse and create a grid, have an exact pattern of where we were going to drill. So this is our roof vent fan. It's not going to be this tall. It's only about that thin. It's actually the thinnest one that Max Air makes. I think it's overall like 3.5 or only 3 inches above the roof. So it'll be nice and streamlined. I have it out here because I'm mocking up and just making sure that it actually fits in the hole that I made for it before I go cutting a 14 by 14 hole. You can see I put an X on exactly where our fan's gonna sit, just so I can't make any mistakes. I actually started to think I was gonna be cutting the hole up there, and that was the wrong one. So just go back and double check yourself, especially on big projects like this, when you just got a lot going on, and make sure you don't make a big mistake like that. So from here, I'll probably drill a hole in each corner, and then I got some metal bits for my air saw or jigsaw. I got them in the toolbox, and we'll go ahead and cut out this piece of aluminum. It was a combination of the air saw, some drill bits, a little bit of angle grinder. The hard part about cutting this was the roof right there. I didn't have rivets because the fan's gonna have to sit flush. So the aluminum actually wanted to kind of flap as I was cutting. So I was utilizing those clamps to help hold it still so I could get it done. Once I got the rough cut done, I just cleaned up all the edges with the angle grinder. Now we're working on the roof raising and lowering with these struts because of the forces they have. Say I've already put the front side down. If I got to lower this back side, that front side wants to pop up. So I was doing some brainstorming. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you may have seen my stories about this already. But I was brainstorming different ways to hold the roof down while it was coming up. As you can see, a ratchet strap holding that bar works really good, but I don't want to do a ratchet strap. That's just too cumbersome and not all that great. I started thinking about doing some sort of tie from the side down. So I'll first maybe try just doing one from top down to bottom here. What made me think of it is I have some of these nylon straps for tying down motorcycle handlebars, and I'm not gonna use this exact one. I'll show you what I'm gonna use. These are actually climbing gear. So this is like rock climbing and stuff like that. Found them on Amazon, it was super cheap. I think it was like 12 bucks for like a 3-pack of them. They're real strong, 22 kN, whatever that means. I'm sure they can support body weight of a person, so they'll be plenty strong for this application. Got some carabiners, and then these are some eyelets that thread into a 1/4-20 thread, which we have some rib nuts. The idea here is I'm gonna have one of those eyelets permanently mounted up here with this carabiner clipped onto there. So when the roof is in this position, all I will simply do is take the bottom half and clip it onto an eyelet, probably somewhere along this channel here. I don't want to do it here because it'll interfere with my mattress, but I can clip it onto the eyelet. So that way when I go to lower the back side of the camper, the front side will be able to pop up, but only slightly because it'll now be limited by our strap. I'm gonna try to do just one and see how it operates, and I may have to end up doing one on each side. I did debate on doing some sort of mechanism that locks in on our hinge here, but as you guys can imagine, with the roof in this position, as the roof goes down, this hinge still has to fold some. So if I were to lock it into position and then try to lower the back side of this roof, it would actually start binding and probably end up bending stuff. So I couldn't do any sort of mechanism on that, and also that could end up just being a little clunky. I think a simple strap that I can just reach over here and clip on will be the best solution to this problem. As you guys have seen so far, having a rib nut tool is very useful on projects. Just being able to throw some threads on any sort of material and create some anchor points is very helpful and saves you a lot of time. Now that we got our straps in, I'm going to show you guys how it operates. So far it's working pretty good. This side does try to lift some, but in the end it all goes down all together. You can see on the strap here, it's just a longer version of these. So this is what also helps me bring it down. I will be adding a handle of some sort up here as well. We grab our strap. Hold down on our bar right here and start clipping in our side straps. I tried to just do one on the left side, and then kind of as I imagined, it would make the lid kind of warp. And as you can see, now these straps are tight. The roof was trying to raise, but it can't. So now we'll go and grab our front side and start to close that. Having a handle right about here is gonna help a lot as far as keeping this side down. But for now, I'm just kind of grabbing where our vent is. And then it's all shut. Reverse the order, we would lift our front. I'll probably end up putting some sort of pads right here to keep it from making that banging noise so bad every time. Just like taking it down, we'll pull down on our bar right here. Start undoing our carabiners. And then we'll let it raise up. Once it gets to the top of the stroke here, it starts to move a little slow. As you can see, it is still raising up. And there we go. Other cool thing about these tie downs is they can kind of double as a gear hanger. So when the camper's all set up like this, you can take a backpack and hang it right here, or just some sort of bag and have some stuff accessible, or maybe even hang up a coat or some sort. I did add a handle here. This is just from tnuts.com, kind of a handle I had left over from other projects. Just some 1/4-20 riv nuts, and just put that right in there. Obviously just easy to unscrew and remove when we go to powder coat. One other thing I added are these stops. I did design these in send cut send as well, and then just riveted them. So it keeps our hinges from being able to fold anymore that way. One last thing I am gonna add is a pin. So what this pin's gonna be when I have it in the full upright position, as you can see, it just holds itself up with these struts, but it'll be a pin that I can just slide through these bars here and just lock these in the upright position in the event it snows or any sort of weight on the roof, or maybe these gas struts start to wear out. I can at least get it up and lock it in place and not have to rely just on these gas struts to hold it up. So that about sums it up for this part of the build. If you guys have any questions on how the roof mechanism works, or anything that I may have left out and didn't realize, please drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Or if you have any ways that I can maybe even improve the design, it's not too late to go through and maybe make some changes if you guys give me some good suggestions, which I'm always open to. In the next part of the build, we should be working on our side doors. I know I've talked about this in the past couple of videos. It just always drags out a little longer than I expect. Aside from that, we got some gussets to add. We're gonna work on some awning mounts, and then hopefully we'll actually get it sitting on the bed of the truck, and I can button up some other stuff and possibly start working on that rear wall. I do have the truck that I need for a couple trips here coming up, so I can't get the camper quite on just yet because I'm gonna need the camper shell and the awning that I already have on there, and it'll just be a pain to be taking stuff on and off. So hopefully soon enough, you guys will be able to see this thing sitting on the back of the truck, and it'll be even closer to being done. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, like I said, drop them in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you next time.